Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I am over from Perth, so it's like middle of the night for me. Anyway, not really, but close. Okay, so I will be talking about the identification of Australian-bred apples with enhanced health attributes. So before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge that this is a multi-centre collaboration between the School of Medicine and Pharmacology and Plant Biology at UWA and the Department of Agricultural and Food WA as well. We've received funding in kind and cash support from a number of groups. So currently from Horticultural Innovation Australia and Pome West. Previously, funding from the Australian National Apple Breeding Program, APAL, and the ARC. So the overarching objective of our research is to identify, develop, and release Australian-bred apples with superior nutritional qualities. Why? Because we believe that health is an important driver of food choices. And also, if in addition to having other desirable attributes, such as taste, texture, color, etc., an apple can be marketed based on specific nutritional health attributes, this could add significant value to the apple and the industry. So a little bit about polyphenols. They are produced as secondary plant metabolites. They contain a phenol group with multiple hydroxyl groups. There are many thousands of polyphenols with a diverse range of functions, but they're classified into two main classes, the flavonoids and the phenolic acids. So we are interested in the flavonoids. There are a number of dietary sources of flavonoids. They're found in a lot of our foods. Of interest there might be red wine and chocolate to some of you, but we're primarily interested in apples. So apples are rich in polyphenols. Now these are also termed antioxidants, so this is a term that is bandied around quite a lot. However, it's becoming clear that the mechanism of action of polyphenols in health is not as an antioxidant, but through more important pathways. So apples are often a major contributor to total flavonoid intake. There is increasing evidence that polyphenol-rich foods and beverages can reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke. And there's evidence that an important mechanism is via nitric oxide, improved blood vessel function and lower blood pressure, which I will show later. So the aims of our research are twofold. Firstly, to screen apple selections for flavonoid composition, to characterize the polyphenols present, and to identify selections with elite polyphenol levels, as well as to demonstrate in human volunteers that consumption of apples with elite flavonoid levels results in effects on cardiovascular disease risk factors consistent with health benefits. So just looking at our first aim, what we have done so far is we've screened a number of apple varieties for polyphenols of interest. So we're interested in the flavonoids quercetin, epicatechin, and fluoresin because there's growing evidence for the health benefits of these flavonoids, and chlorogenic acid, which is a phenolic acid. Quercetin and epicatechin are concentrated in the apple skin of apples, and chlorogenic acid is found both in the skin and the flesh. Now we see variation in the polyphenol flavonoid content of the apples. There's no real standout apple, but there is variation. Crips Pink, marketed as Pink Lady, is quite high, as is Western Dawn there. So this slide just shows that there are demonstrated health benefits with the flavonoids present in apples at levels consistent with eating 1 or 2 apples a day. We've also screened these apples over a number of years, and this work is ongoing. But what we do find that there is a huge seasonal variation in the flavonoid content of apples. So looking at our second aim to demonstrate in human volunteers that consumption of apples with elite flavonoid levels results in effects on cardiovascular disease risk factors consistent with health benefits. What I'll present here is actually the first study to show that flavonoid-rich apples improve nitric oxide status and endothelial function. And these are benefits consistent with improved cardiovascular health. And what these results translate into is a natural and low-cost approach to improving the cardiovascular risk profile of the general population. So cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in Australia. And it has a huge impact on quality of life with those living with the disease. and it is a huge burden on Australia's economy, amounting to billions of dollars annually. So epidemiological studies show that increased intake of fruit and vegetables lowers your risk of cardiovascular disease. So what are the phytochemicals responsible for lowering this risk? So there's a huge amount of research that's going into this, and one of the phytochemicals that has been highlighted as protective are the flavonoids. So apples are a rich source of flavonoids. As I said earlier, they're concentrated in the skin, and being one of the most popular fruits consumed worldwide, they're a major contributor to flavonoid intake. They're particularly rich in epicatechin and the quercetin glycosides. However, improved endothelial function and nitric oxide status has not previously been demonstrated with apple intake. So the aim of our study was to investigate the acute effect, so short-term effect, of flavonoid-rich apples on endothelial function and nitric oxide status in healthy men and women. We enrolled 30 healthy people into a randomized controlled crossover trial, and in random order they received a high flavonoid active treatment, which was an apple with the skin, or a low flavonoid control, which was the apple flesh only. And the apple that we gave them was Crips Pink, marketed as Pink Lady. So this slide just shows that there was a significant increase in quercetin and epicatechin with the apple active treatment compared to the control that we were giving our volunteers. So just looking at the typical study day, our volunteers had breakfast with their first apple treatment and then lunch with their second apple treatment. The reason we did this was because flavonoids peak in the bloodstream at different times, so we wanted our tests to coincide with when they peaked in the bloodstream. We looked at blood pressure measurements at regular intervals. We took a blood sample, and we did a technique called flow-mediated dilatation, which I'll talk about shortly. So just briefly, a little bit about the endothelium. This is a single layer of cells that is on the inside of our blood vessels, and this endothelium is vitally important for our cardiovascular health. It controls the dilation and constriction of our blood vessels through release of a molecule called nitric oxide. So this regulates our blood pressure. So having a look at our results now, I said that we took a blood sample, and this was 2 hours after the last apple treatment, and we saw a significant increase in measurements of nitric oxide with the apple compared to the control. And I mentioned flow-mediated dilatation. So a little bit about this technique. What we do is we get our volunteers to lie on a bed, and we put a blood pressure cuff around their forearm, and we put an ultrasound probe over their brachial artery. And we get a picture of their brachial artery, which is that solid line over there. What we do is we increase the pressure in the blood pressure cuff to over 200 millimeters mercury for 5 minutes. So we're occluding blood flow. After 5 minutes, we release the blood pressure cuff, and you get an increase of blood flow through the artery, which then dilates in response to that increase in blood flow. And it's that dilation that we actually measure. So that gives you an indication of your blood vessel function, how elastic it is. And it also tells us about the action of nitric oxide as well, which controls that dilation. So what we saw 2 hours after apple consumption was an increase in our flow-mediated dilatation. So we saw an increase in the amount that the artery dilated. So, and this was consistent at 30-second intervals after we released the blood pressure cuff. So this shows us that the flavonoids in the apple are improving our blood vessel function through nitric oxide, which is an important mechanism. So in conclusion, what we showed was that flavonoid-rich apples improve nitric oxide status and endothelial function, and these are factors which benefit cardiovascular health. And the results translate into a natural and low-cost approach to reducing the cardiovascular risk profile of the general population. So our work is still continuing in this field in 2 phases. So with the first phase is to characterize the flavonoid composition of current and potential new apple varieties. So this work is ongoing and will continue hopefully for a number of years. Also to explore the stability of quercetin, which I said is one of the major flavonoids in apples, during storage of major Australian apple varieties. So this work is currently being done. I've just had a whole lot of apples come out of storage, and I'm analysing the flavonoid content. In phase 2, they established the importance of quercetin content of apples for health benefit in humans. So this study has actually just completed. So we conducted a randomised controlled clinical trial where we had healthy volunteers and we gave them pure quercetin because we wanted to see if that was what was causing the effect in apples. So we're analysing those results right now and looking promising. And the second and last part of phase 2 is determine whether regular consumption of a high quercetin apple results in a sustained health benefit. So this clinical trial is currently being done. We've got 25 volunteers at the moment who are consuming Pink Ladies for 4 weeks, and we're going to measure, and after the 4 weeks we're measuring a whole lot of factors related to cardiovascular health. Thank you.